Today we're looking at an IEM that comes with a free Dolphin, the Rose Technics Star City 5 Pro. This review copy was provided by Rose Technics free of charge in exchange for my honest opinion. I won't say that my opinion isn't biased, because of course it is. Given a choice, I would wear headphones all year round, but due to the ever-increasing temperatures of European summers, I must use in-ear monitors. At a price of around $75 or 70 euros, let's see what these are made of. According to the marketing info, the main part of the plastic body is a 3D printed resin, and the rear cap and support is CNC machined stainless steel. While the design aesthetic might not be for everyone, they look and feel very high quality in the hand, and together they house a single in-house developed Japanese liquid crystal polymer or LCP dynamic driver and two balanced armature drivers. You may have heard about liquid crystal polymer drivers before, as I believe they were first used for headphones in the Sony MDR R1. The balanced armature drivers are advertised as Danish, so they are almost certainly by Sonyon. I never found the shells to be uncomfortable, but I did have to roll the tips a few times until settling upon the medium tips, in combination with a very shallow insertion. Overall, the fit was somewhat loose due to their smaller size, but they stayed well in place even after some vigorous headbanging tests. Also, these are one of the rare in-ear monitors for me that didn't get loose or strongly affected by jaw movement, for example when chewing gum. The connectors are MMCX, which usually is a huge disappointment for me. I've always had very mixed feelings about this connector, especially with poor tolerance consistency between cable and socket manufacturers. In this case, I must say I'm pleasantly surprised with the quality and choice of connector in this instance. The connection between the plug and socket is very tight, but the cable is allowed to rotate freely, which is a great addition to the ergonomics. I almost always struggle with over-ear IEM fit. I found these cables and their implementation to be some of the best I've ever used for their ergonomics. The cable shape doesn't fight my ear, it works with it. The cable is sheathed in a very fine synthetic fabric weave, so friction does transmit some dark sounding noise, but only significantly from any movement from the cable behind the ears where the laminated part ends, but that should normally not be a common issue for anyone. The metal ring between the two channels of the cable is the only one I've used so far that doesn't slide down on its own, so it has more use than just for tidy storage if you prefer to have a tighter fit with the cable closer to your chin. The case suits this cable very well. This type of thin cable with a tight fabric sheath is definitely better off wound more loosely without tight bends. It's not the easiest case to open at first, but after a couple of weeks it loosens up a bit. It's also a little bit on the larger side, but nothing too obnoxious. Perhaps some may find it a bit too tall. The build quality, however, seems good and is finished to appear on the more premium end. And most importantly, not only does it make dolphin noises, but can also make horse noises. Another interesting point about the marketing of this IEM, aside from the ergonomic design, describes a full chain pressure circulation system utilizing 5 customized dampers to optimize pressure levels. This genuinely interested me, as ear fatigue from sound pressure is something I've been trying to minimize lately. Of course, there is no shortage of IEMs that already use some kind of venting system for tuning, so I was curious about how it stacks up against some other IEMs for fatigue control. More on that later. In the box, I also found a USB-C to 3.5mm adapter, 4 sets of wide bore tips, and 3 sets of narrow bore tips. The DAC adapter dongle feels neither too cheap or particularly high-end, so I think it fits well into this price bracket, and is a very welcome addition. I didn't even open the packet with the narrow bore tips, because as I was tip rolling from my stash, I found that other narrow bore tips didn't always fit or stay on the nozzle. So all of my sound impressions are from using this with the medium-size wide bore tips. Some people may prefer to use foam tips with these, although they didn't work so well for me personally due to the fairly long nozzle length. The first thing I noticed when putting these on for the very first time was the soundstage and imaging. It's not huge, but still noticeably wider than other IEMs, and also has fairly decent imaging and some extra height to the sound that does occasionally leave the headspace. I think this is a very rare treat at any price point, especially with IEMs, which seem to seldom have more than only one of these qualities at once. Without even looking at the frequency response graph, I could clearly hear that these are extremely neutral, bordering on the lean and treble forward. On the graph, there is only the most subtle of downward slopes from the bass up to the treble, meaning that these are more lean than the Harman target. A strong peak at 10 kHz may be piercing for some. Personally, I don't find this peak uncomfortable, and I think it might also be slightly exaggerated by the mini DSP ears. The other main thing to take note of is the significantly weaker pinna gain at 4 kHz, which makes these sound excellent out of the box, if a touch forward and thin in the vocal range. I'm in the camp of humans that require absolutely no pinna gain, and I would still bring this region down by about 3 or 4 decibels in EQ. With a sensitivity of 104 decibels at 1 milliwatt, while it can be run off any device, it is particularly sensitive to devices with even the slightest hint of electrical hissing or humming, so some caution is needed there. The bass, which is exceptionally linear all the way down to 10 Hz, makes this particular IEM perfect for home, library, or office use. As soon as you take these outdoors, the bass just isn't strong enough to compete with city noise or public transport, so prepare to use some EQ if you're planning on using these in various places. Something interesting I noticed in the marketing material online was that these were tuned by ex-Sony engineers. Of course, it's difficult to say how much of a difference this made to the end result, but comparing the frequency response of the Star City 5 Pro with the Sony IEM7, even I find it difficult to think that this may not just be more than a coincidence. Looking back again at some of the marketing material for the IEM, whether the multi-way damping matching can truly optimize the air pressure level and reduce ear pressure or not may be just as significant as the bass light tuning. The lack of emphasis almost anywhere in the response already has the effect of reducing ear fatigue, which is something I do suffer from sometimes, particularly with IEMs and closed-back headphones. Perhaps there is something to be said about this design with its multiple damping and vents. Of course, I can't speak for everyone, but I think because of the extra care taken in the design and execution of its damping and venting system, it has a much more gentle and musical sound than the average IEM, at least to me, and these ultra macro shots show that they have actually used some incredibly fine woven mesh on these. Finally, the sound quality of the USB DAC adapter it's totally fine. There was no immediate noticeable difference between using this adapter or the 3.5mm socket on my phone. For anyone interested, it actually seems to use a very capable DAC, with a sample rate up to 32 bits at 384,000 kHz. On the PC, it showed up as the CX21993 384 kHz hi-fi audio, and a quick comparison measurement with my Sennheiser HD650 against the Fozzy SK2, which I know to be neutral, shows that the adapter provided by Technics also does not appear to impart any tonal characteristics of its own. Now for some comparisons. Shure SE215 Pro. The difference is clear. The Shure is not as competent as the Star City 5 Pro. Detail and musicality are lacking in the Shure, but ergonomics and isolation are a step above the Technics. I also think the Shure is slightly better tuned for the masses. Next, we have the Blon BL03. The Blon easily wins with one of the better sub-$100 tunings and a very convincing sub-bass performance, but otherwise falls behind in its technical finesse and incorrect timbre, especially in the upper mids and lower treble. Next, the KZ Habibi PR2. Things got really interesting here. The tuning between the two is shockingly similar, but the KZ has a rising sub-bass. So, While the KZ has the superior tuning in the bass, it also has a weaker treble performance and is on the sharp, shrill side. But that's where the nitpicking ends, because the Star City 5 Pro provides a superior musical performance with better staging and imaging. Next, the JVC HAFW 1800. This has been my go-to higher-end IEM for a while. The JVC is not as well tuned for my needs, as it has a strong 4 kHz ear canal gain, which I always EQ out. Aside from that, I found the technical performance between the two very similar, with the JVC edging out in the lead, especially in its rendering of sub-bass, which is something JVC has always been particularly good at. Looking back at what sticks out the most, I think I need to put an emphasis on the musical aspect of the sound. Generally, I don't love IEMs. They often have too many shortcomings, compromises, or tuning oddities that leads me to ignore them or quickly move back to the few that I trust. I wasn't expecting to say this, but the Star City 5 Pro is one of the best IEMs I have ever tried, and not because of its tuning. It's not bassy enough for my personal taste, and doesn't suit my ear canal gain needs, but because as an entire package, it does almost nothing wrong in its build, ergonomics, and technical delivery. For an IEM to also provide good staging and imaging is a huge bonus. In a saturated market, if you're willing to save a bit of money by avoiding the higher end models and have no qualms about using a bit of EQ to reach your perfect sound, I can't see any good reason not to give this IEM a strong passing grade, and maybe even a recommendation. So that's it for now. Take it easy, and I'll see you in the next one.